Welcome to African Folktales Hub by Chris. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notification. Gubrug Buru lived at the edge of the ridge, where the soil was dark and soft. The kind that remembered footsteps. Children feared his compound because it was always quiet. Too quiet for comfort. No goats wandered there. No birds stayed long. Yet the old man was never cruel. He greeted everyone with the same calm eyes. How does it look like they hain the days when Azima Ridge still listened to the wind? There lived an old man named Gubrug Buru. He was not loud. He did not argue. He did not join village meetings unless his name was called 3 times. People said he was once the village gravekeeper. Back when the dead were buried with care and truth still mattered, but time passed. And people stopped asking him questions. They only remembered him when someone died. These seen things they would never repeat. Then one market day, Gubrug Buru did not come out. By sunset, someone noticed the silence was heavier than usual. By morning, the truth arrived like cold rain. The old man was dead. No sickness, no struggle. Just gone. The elders said it was age. Others said the spirits finally called him home. But a few people avoided looking at each other, because they remembered things they had told Gubrug Buru to bury long ago. And as they prepared his grave, none of them asked one dangerous question. Gubrug Buru was buried quickly, the way people bury things they do not want to remember. No long prayers, no deep mourning. Just enough respect to quiet the spirits and enough haste to calm guilty hearts. The elders chose a spot near the old silk cotton tree, far from the village square, where few people walked at night. As they lowered his body, the earth made a dull sound, heavy and final. Some villagers flinched, though they did not know why. Others avoided the grave completely once it was filled. They said the ground there felt warm, even under the morning sun. After the burial, life in Azima Ridge returned to its rhythm. Women went back to the stream. Men returned to their farms. Laughter slowly found its way back to the evenings. But something unseen had shifted 3 nights later. The first sound came, a low knocking, not from any door, but from the ground itself. At first, people thought it was thunder moving underground. Then dogs began to howl, facing the direction of Gubrug Buru's grave. A child woke screaming, saying an old man was calling names from beneath the soil. The elders met and laughed it off fear. They said, "Is louder at night." Yet none of them slept well, because deep inside they knew Gubrug Buru had never spoken unless the truth demanded it. The first person to fall sick was Amalaha, the woman who once accused her brother's wife of witchcraft. She woke one morning unable to speak, her mouth open, but only air came out. Her eyes stayed wide, full of panic, as if she wanted to confess something her tongue refused to release. People said it was stroke, others whispered it was punishment. That same evening, a strange thing happened at Gubrug Buru's grave. Fresh footprints appeared around it, deep and clear, even though it had not rained. The prints went in circles, as if someone had walked around the grave many times. Thinking hard, the village had sent young men to smooth the ground. By morning, the footprints were back. Then the dreams began. Men dreamed of Gubrug Buru standing, silently holding a shovel, pointing at them one by one. Women dreamed of buried pots cracking open. Children dreamed of the ground opening its mouth. Still, the elders insisted nothing was wrong. They told the people, the dead do not speak. But they forgot one thing. Truth, when buried with a man, does not die. It waits, and in Azima Ridge, the waiting had ended. It was Nandi, the hunter, who heard the voice clearly for the first time. He was returning late from the forest when the wind stopped suddenly. The trees froze, and the night became thick. Then, from the direction of the grave, a voice rose old, calm, familiar. Bring it back. Nandi dropped his hunting bag and ran. By morning, his hair had turned gray in patches. When the elders questioned him, he refused to speak. He only pointed toward the silk cotton tree and shook. That was when people began remembering. They remembered the missing land document, the girl who disappeared years ago, the oath taken secretly at night. They remembered how Gubrug Buru had been paid to dig holes that were never meant for bodies alone. The elders gathered again, this time with fear in their throats. They decided the problem was not the truth but the grave. If the grave is disturbed, one elder said, the noise will stop, and so. Under the cover of darkness, they went to Gubrug Buru's resting place. carrying tools and lies. They planned to silence the earth the way they always had, but the ground does not forget the weight of truth, and when their tools touched the soil, something beneath answered back. The earth cracked with a sound like a deep breath, not loud, but heavy. The men froze, one dropped his shovel. Another began to cry like a child. From the broken soil came a smell old, sharp, and familiar. It was the smell of secrets long buried. Then the voice spoke again, clearer than before. "You buried it with me," it said. "Now dig." The lanterns flickered. One went out completely. In that darkness, the men saw something moving beneath the soil, not rising, not falling, but shifting. As if the ground itself was turning over memories. They ran by morning. Azima Ridge knew the truth could no longer stay underground. The elders called an emergency gathering. For the first time in years, no one sat comfortably. Even the bravest men avoided the center. That was when the oldest elder stood and spoke with a shaking voice. "We buried more than a man," he said. "We buried the truth." A wail rose from the crowd, because everyone understood now the grave was not asking for fear. It was asking for honesty, and until the truth was returned to the light. Azima Ridge would know no peace. The grave had answered. After the elders spoke, silence fell over Azima Ridge like a heavy cloth. No one shouted. No one argued. People only looked at the ground, as if afraid it might answer back again, that night. Fires burned longer than usual, but sleep refused to come. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow looked deeper. At midnight, the grave cried, not with tears, but with sound, a slow grinding, as if something beneath the soil was turning over. Houses closest to the silk cotton tree shook gently, like they were breathing. Pots rattled. Chickens flapped wildly. A baby would not stop crying. By morning, the path leading to the grave was cracked, thin lines running through the earth like scars. The elders met again. This time with younger men present, they decided. The village must confess, one by one, starting with those who had dealings with Gubrug Buru when he was alive. The first was Azila, the former land chief. His hands shook as he stood before the people. His voice came out dry. "There was land," he said, "and there was a girl." A murmur spread through the crowd. Azila swallowed hard. "We told Gubrug Buru to bury the truth." The wind rose suddenly, sharp and cold, and the ground listened. The girl's name was Amara. People remembered her now. She had been young, quiet, always carrying books under her arm. She vanished one rainy season, and the elders said she had gone to stay with relatives far away. Some believed it. Others pretended too. Azila's confession opened something that could not be closed again. She saw the land papers. He continued. She heard things she should not have heard. Another elder stepped forward, his face pale. "We only wanted silence," he said weakly, "not death." The crowd stirred. Mothers clutched their children closer. Fathers shifted uneasily. That night, the dreams changed. Instead of Gubrug Buru standing silently, people saw Amara. She stood beside the grave, barefoot, her school uniform stained with red soil. She did not cry. She only looked at them, waiting it by morning. 3 more elders fell sick. 1 could not stand. Another spoke only in whispers. The third kept digging at the ground with his bare hands until they bled. The village healer refused to help. "This sickness is not for herbs," she said. "It is for truth." When the sun set, a child ran screaming from the grave, shouting that the shadows now stood there instead of one. The village understood then. The dead were no longer alone. Fear finally broke the pride of Azima Ridge. The elders agreed to return to the place where Amara was last seen. It was a small clearing behind the old storehouse, where the ground stayed damp even in dry season. Gubrug Buru had dug there once long ago. Under orders no one wanted to remember. As they approached, the air grew thick. Birds flew away. Even insects went quiet. The ground was softest of soft. When they dug, they found bones wrapped in a faded school uniform, a broken slate, a rusted hairpin. Someone began to wail loudly. Another collapsed to the ground. They carried Amara's remains back to the village square, laying them gently on white cloth. For the first time in years, people cried openly, not from fear, but from shame. That night, the grave went silent. No sound, no wind, no dreams. But the silence felt unfinished. The village head knelt by Gubrug Buru's grave and spoke aloud. "We brought back the truth," he said. What else do you want?" The earth answered softly, like a side justice. The next morning, strangers arrived in Azima Ridge, men with books, pens, and questions. The law had finally found its way to the ridge. It had not come alone. The strangers listened carefully as the story poured out, not just of Amara, but of many small lies that had grown fat and heavy over the years. Land stolen, voices silenced, truths buried with shovels and fear. One by one, names were written down. Some elders protested. "We have settled it traditionally," they argued. "Why wake sleeping Trouble?" The leader of the strangers looked at them calmly. "Trouble was never asleep," he said. "You were that night." For the first time since the burial, Gubrug Buru appeared in dreams smiling. He stood beside Amara, no shovel in his hand, no weight on his back. The ground beneath them was smooth. In the village square, people gathered quietly. No drums, no dancing, just listening. Confession followed confession. Sons learned the truth about fathers. Wives learned what husbands had hidden. Pain spread, but it also cleaned. When the arrests came, no one resisted. Heads were bowed. Hands were offered willingly as the guilty were led away. A gentle rain began to fall. It washed the dust from the roads and cooled the angry ground. That night, children slept peacefully for the first time since Gurug Buru's death. Azima Ridge breathed easily, but the story was not yet complete. Amara was buried properly this time, beside her mother's grave, with songs of farewell and tears that meant something. The whole village attended. Even those who once denied her existence stood silently, humbled that when the soil was finally settled. A strange thing happened. Flowers bloomed overnight around both graves, small white ones that had never grown there before. The healer smiled softly. "The earth is satisfied," she said. Gurug Buru's grave changed too. The cracks closed. The warmth faded. Birds returned to the silk cotton tree. People visited often, not in fear, but in respect. Parents warned their children gently, "Do not bury lies. They grow teeth." Years passed. Azima Ridge became quieter, not from fear, but from thoughtfulness. Disputes were settled openly. Land was shared fairly. The old habit of silence broke slowly, but completely. On quiet evenings, elders told the story to children sitting close to the fire. They spoke of the old man who kept graves and carried secrets heavier than bones. They ended the story the same way every time. "You can bury a body," the elder would say, "but truth has a voice. And one day, even the grave will answer." Years after the arrests, Azima Ridge looked peaceful on the surface, but peace does not mean forgetting. It means remembering wisely. Children who once ran freely now asked questions. They wanted to know why elders lowered their voices when passing the silk cotton tree. They wanted to know why no one joked about graves anymore, so the elders began to teach. They told how silence once ruled the village, how fear dressed itself like respect, how truth was treated as a dangerous thing that must be hidden underground. They spoke slowly, carefully, like men handling fragile clay. One evening, a boy asked, "Why didn't Gubrug Buru speak when he was alive?" The oldest elder sighed. "Because some truths are too heavy for one man," he said, "and because we told him to carry them." That night, the elder dreamed of Gubrug Buru again. This time, the old man was sitting under the silk cotton tree, watching children play. When the elder woke, his chest felt lighter, but not everyone accepted the lessons. Some families whispered that the past should stay buried. They avoided the graves. They discouraged questions. They feared that speaking too much might wake something else. They did not know that truth, once awakened, never sleeps again, and Azima Ridge was about to learn that remembering is a duty, not a choice. The first test came when a land dispute arose between the families. In the old days, such a matter would have been settled quietly, with gifts exchanged and voices silenced. But this time, the village paused. People remembered Amara. They remembered Gubrug Buru. Instead of whispers, they called a public meeting. Everyone spoke. Documents were brought out. The truth, though uncomfortable, stood in the open sunlight. The land was returned to its rightful owners. Some elders felt uneasy. "This way brings trouble," they murmured. But the healer shook her head. "This way brings pain first," she said. Then peace. That night, the silk cotton tree shed its leaves softly, even though it was not the season. Children collected them, laughing. The ground remained calm out far away. News of Azima Ridge spread. Other villages heard the story of the grave that spoke. Some laughed. Some grew afraid. A few listened closely. Strangers began to visit, asking questions, seeking advice. They wanted to know how a village survived after tearing open its own wounds. The elders answered honestly. It was not easy, they said, but lies are heavier than truth. And slowly, Izima Ridge became known not for fear, but for courage. One afternoon, a young woman named Iphigenia arrived carrying a child on her back. Her eyes were tired, but strong. She stood before the elders and spoke without shaking. In my village, she said, a man hides behind respect the way your elders once did. A girl has disappeared. They say she ran away. The elders looked at one another. They heard an old echo in her words. Iphigenia continued, I came because I heard the ground hereon spoke. Silence followed. Not the fearful silence of before, but a thoughtful one. The village head nodded slowly. Sit, he said. Tell us everything. As she spoke, the wind moved gently through the square. The silk cotton leaves rustled, not in warning, but in agreement. The elders did not dismiss her. They did not ask her to be quiet. Instead, they wrote down names. They sent messages. They walked with her back to her village. When the truth there began to rise, people resisted at first. But truth has a way of finding cracks. That night, Izima Ridge slept well. The grave did not speak, because sometimes, just as spoken by the living is enough to keep the dead at rest, Atan continued its steady walk. New elders rose. Old ones grew slower. But one rule remained firm. No truth would be buried again. The silk cotton tree became a place of learning. Children sat beneath it while elders spoke of Amara, of Gubrug Buru, and of the cost of silence. They did not hide the pain. They did not soften the shame. We tell you this, the elders said, so you will not repeat it. One dry season, a long crack appeared in the earth far from the graves. People gathered, fear returning like an old habit. But the healer examined it and smiled. The ground is only breathing, she said. That night, no dreams came. No voices rose. The village rested at Gurug Buru's grave. Someone placed a simple carving, a shovel crossed with an open eye. No name, no praise. Just a reminder, visitors often stopped there asking questions. Parents answered honestly. He carried what we refused to carry, they said. Slowly, fear lost its power. Respect replaced it. The village learned something rare, that truth does not destroy communities. Silence does, and so Izima Ridge stood not perfect, not pure but awake. When the oldest elder finally died, the whole village gathered. This time, there was no rush, no hurried burial. Every word spoken was clear. Every tear was allowed. Before he was lowered into the ground, a child stepped forward and asked softly, will he speak from the grave too? The healer knelt and shook her head gently. No, she said. He spoke enough while alive. As the soil covered the body, the ground stayed calm. No warmth, no sound. Only stillness. That night, the village dreamed together. They saw Gubrug Buru walking away along a quiet path, his shovel resting lightly on his shoulder. Amara walked beside him, laughing. Ahead of them stood elders and children, living and dead, all facing the same direction that when morning came. Izima Ridge woke with clear hearts. The elders gathered the children and spoke one final lesson. Truth does not need graves, they said. It needs voices. And from that day on, whenever someone tried to hide a lie, another would speak up and say, remember the old man. The village would grow quiet, not from fear, but from understanding. As seasons passed, Izima Ridge learned that truth is not a single event, but a daily choice. Small matters tested them often. A missing goat, a broken boundary line, a harsh word spoken in anger. Each time, the village paused and chose openness over silence. Still, temptation did not disappear. 1 year, a wealthy trader offered gifts to claim part of the riverbank. He smiled politely and spoke sweet words. Some young men listened closely. The riverland was valuable, and hunger can make lies sound reasonable. That night, rain fell hard. Water rushed loudly through the stream, rising higher than usual. It stopped just before flooding the homes. As if warning, not punishing, the elders gathered the next morning. They did not accuse. They asked questions. The young men confessed their doubts and fears. The trader was thanked and refused. When calm returned, the healer spoke quietly. Truth warned you before harm arrived. She said that at Gurug Buru's grave, someone noticed the soil looked freshly turned, though no footprint could be found. No voice followed. No fear rose. The message was enough. Izima Ridge understood again. Truth does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, giving people a chance to choose wisely. And the village chose well. A long drought came the following year. Crops struggled. Streams thinned. Old fears crept back like shadows at sunset. People whispered, wondering if the spirits were angry again. The healer listened and shook her head. Not every hardship is punishment, she said. Sometimes it is only life. Still, the elders led prayers with open hearts. They did not hide anything. They spoke of mistakes, of worries, of hope. Children listened and learned that honesty includes admitting fear. One night, a dream came to many villagers at once. They saw Gubrug Buru standing beside dry fields, pressing his palm into the soil. When he lifted it, green shoots followed. Rain fell 2 days later. People rejoiced, but not with pride. They understood that truth does not control life, but it prepares the heart to endure it. After the harvest, the village shared food with nearby communities suffering more. They told the story again not as a threat, but as a lesson. Do not wait for graves to speak, they warned gently. Let the living speak first. The silk cotton tree stood tall, its roots deep, holding soil and memory together that as children grew into adults. They carried the story with them beyond Izima Ridge. Some married into other villages. Some traveled far for work. Wherever they went, they recognized familiar signs, quiet lies, respected silence, buried wrongs, and sometimes they spoke, not loudly, not proudly, but clearly that in one town, a young man from Izima Ridge refused to sign a false statement against an innocent woman. When threatened, he remembered Omara. He stood firm. The case broke open that in another place, a woman told her children the story at night. Years later, those children refused to hide abuse in their home. Healing began. Back in Izima Ridge, visitors still came. They walked slowly around Gurug Buru's grave, touching the soil with care. Some left offerings. Others left tears. The healer reminded them, do not worship the grave. Honor the lesson. At sunset, elders often sat together, watching the ridge glow red and gold. They spoke softly of how close they once came to losing everything. We were saved, one said. Not by magic, but by truth. And everyone nodded, knowing how rare that salvation was. One evening, long after the story had become legend, a stranger arrived carrying a shovel. He asked politely if he could rest near the silk cotton tree. The village watched him carefully. He said he was a grave digger, traveling from place to place, doing work no one else wanted. His hands were rough. His eyes were tired that an elder asked him, why do you choose such work? The stranger smiled sadly, because someone must face what others fear. The healer studied him closely, then nodded. You may stay, she said. That night, no dreams came. The ground stayed silent during the morning. The stranger left quietly. Near Gurug Buru's grave, a new carving stood beside the old one, an open mouth. No one saw who placed it. The elders understood. Truth must be spoken. Not just seen that from that day. The story gained one more line. Elders added it carefully, so children would remember. Truth is not heavy because it is dangerous, they said. It is heavy because it is real, and the village carried it together. It softened Izima Ridge, but did not weaken it. New houses rose. Old paths remained. The silk cotton tree grew wider, its shade sheltering many generations. When storms came, people stood together. When joy arrived, they shared it openly. Secrets lost their power because no one fed them anymore. One evening, a child asked the healer, will the grave ever speak again? The healer smiled and answered slowly. Only if we forget. The child thought deeply, then shook his head. We won't, he said. Down at Gurug Buru's grave, flowers still bloomed every year without planting. Emra's name was spoken freely now, not with fear, but with honor as elders grew fewer. The story passed into younger mouths. It did not change. It did not fade, because some stories are not meant to entertain. They are meant to protect. And so, as long as Izima Ridge remembered, the ground stayed quiet. The dead rested. The living spoke, and truth, no longer buried, walked freely among them. When the healer finally felt her strength fading, she called the village together. Her hair was white now, her voice softer, but her eyes were still sharp with memory. Children sat closest, because she said they must hear first. I did not stop the grave, she told them. Truth did. She reminded them how easy it once was to pretend, to obey silence, to bury wrongs and call it peace. She spoke of Gubrug Buru, not as a spirit, but as a man who carried what others refused to hold. When you are tempted to hide a lie, she said. Remember his back bent under weight that was not his, that night. As she slept her last sleep, the wind passed gently through Izima Ridge. No cries followed. No signs appeared. The ground stayed calmest at her burial. Children placed white flowers on the soil, just as they did for Amara and Gubrug Buru. The elders noticed something, then the graves formed a quiet line, like a path of truth. The village understood that guardians do not always stand forever. Sometimes they teach, then leave, and when they do, the lesson must walk on its own. Years later, a dispute reached Izima Ridge from far away. A powerful family wanted to silence a case by offering wealth. They believed tradition could be bent again. The village listened politely, then they refused. No gift is heavier than truth, the elders said calmly. The visitors laughed at first. Then they grew angry. Then they left, confused and shaken that night. Young people gathered around the fire, asking why the elders were not afraid. That an old woman answered, "Fear grows when lies are fed. We starved it long ago." The silk cotton tree swayed gently, its roots holding firm. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the powerful family failed. The truth came out without graves, without spirits, only voices. When news returned, Izima Ridge did not celebrate loudly. They nodded quietly. Satisfied, the story continued to travel, not as a curse, but as a warning. Do not wait until silence turns dangerous. Do not force the ground to speak. Let the living speak first. And so the village stayed watchful, not of spirits, but of itself. Old age returned often in Izima Ridge, but fear did not. Death became something faced with honesty, not haste. Graves were dug slowly, with care and prayer, never hiding more than bodies. Just one evening, a young boy asked his grandfather, "Were you afraid when the grave spoke?" The old man nodded. "Yes, but I was more afraid of what we had done." The boy thought for a long time. "So truth saved us?" The grandfather smiled sadly. "Truth did not save us," he said. "It gave us a chance to save ourselves." As the boy grew, he told his story to others, always carefully, never changing the meaning. He spoke of Amara's quiet courage, of Guruk Buru's heavy silence, of elders who learned to late, but not too late. The story became part of greetings, of warnings, of advice. It lived in language. At sunset, visitors still stopped by the graves. Some felt peace, others felt discomfort. Both were welcome, because truth does not promise comfort. That it promises clarity, and clarity, though sharp, keeps people awake. One final test came many years later, when a fire broke out near the ridge. Flames moved fast, driven by dry wind. Panic spread quickly, but the village did not hide. They shouted warnings. They shared water. They opened paths. No one locked doors. No one protected, only themselves. When the fire passed, damage was small. Lives were saved. An elder stood afterward and said, "This is what truth taught us. Nothing survives alone." That night, the stars shone brightly. Children asked if Gubrug Buru could see them. "He can rest." An elder replied, "We are watching now." The graves remained quiet, covered in flowers and memory. No warm throes. No voices called, because the truth no longer needed a grave to carry it, so it walked freely, held by many hands. And Izima Ridge stood strong, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. So this is how the story ends, as all true stories should, with a lesson. Not a miracle. They buried the truth with an old man, believing silence would protect them. Instead, silence sharpened the pain. The grave spoke because it had to. But once truth returned to the light, the earth rested. Remember this, child of listening ears. Graves are not meant to speak. People, it's when truth is buried, it grows restless. When truth is spoken, it becomes light enough to carry. Gubrug Buru did not rise from the ground. Amara did not walk back into the village. Justice did not erase pain, but honesty healed what silence kept bleeding. And so Izima Ridge lives on, not famous for fear, not ruled by legend, but guided by memories. If ever you feel tempted to hide a lie, remember the old man and the grave that answered is. Then choose wisely, because the earth listens, and truth always finds its voice.